The moment people fully understand you, they stop fearing you. That sentence should bother you, because most of your life has been spent trying to be understood, explained, decoded, summarized into something other people can predict. You called it connection. It was surrender. Carl Jung spent his life studying what he called the shadow, the part of a person no one is allowed to see. And he noticed something that most people never sit with long enough to feel its weight. The moment your shadow becomes visible, your power over a room disappears with it. Here is the part that changes everything. Being known and being predictable are the same thing wearing different names. If someone can finish your sentences, they can finish your decisions. If they know how you'll react to betrayal, they've already planned around it. If they know what makes you proud, ashamed, or desperate, they own the levers before you've noticed there were levers at all. So before you go further, sit with this. Where in your life have you already let someone learn your levers? That's the question to answer in the comments, not later, now, while it's still uncomfortable. Understand this clearly. Jung never said hide who you are. He said most people have confused exposure with intimacy. They think revealing every reaction, every wound, every private calculation is honesty. It isn't. It's surrender dressed in the language of vulnerability. Real intimacy is chosen, selective, given to the few who've earned it. What you've been calling openness was an open door, and open doors get walked through by anyone. But here is what most people miss about this. A man who reveals nothing isn't hiding from weakness, he's hiding the schematic. Jung called the persona the mask we present to the world, and most people treat their persona as a flaw, something fake they need to dismantle to be authentic. That assumption is exactly backward. The persona isn't the lie, the persona is the wall, and the people demanding you tear it down are rarely asking for honesty, they're asking for access. Listen carefully, because this is where it stops being theory. Every person who has ever manipulated you did it the same way, not through force, but through prediction. They watched your patterns until your reactions became data. Then they stopped reacting to you and started directing you. Because a man whose next move is already known isn't a participant in the interaction anymore. He's a variable in someone else's equation. This is why Jung's shadow work was never really about confronting darkness for its own sake. It was about ownership. The parts of yourself you refuse to look at are exactly the parts other people will find first, and whoever finds them before you do gets to decide what they mean. Your shame becomes their leverage. Your unexamined anger becomes their excuse. Your unspoken fear becomes the thing they casually mention at exactly the wrong moment. But discovering your shadow isn't the same as displaying it. That's the part almost everyone gets wrong next. Here is the difference. The undisciplined man finds his shadow and performs it, turns his pain into a personality, his trauma into a permanent identity, his darkness into a costume he wears so everyone can see how deep he supposedly is. The disciplined man finds his shadow and goes silent about it. He integrates what he learns. He lets no one watch the process. Jung understood that individuation, becoming a whole person, happens in privacy, not in performance. The moment you turn your transformation into content for other people to react to, it stops being transformation. It becomes theater, and theater needs an audience to survive. Of those two men, which one have you been? The one who heals quietly, or the one who needs witnesses to believe it happened? Answer that one honestly in the comments, not for me, for the version of you reading it back later. And here is where it gets uncomfortable in a different way. You've probably been taught that confidence means being expressive, loud opinions, visible certainty, performed strength. Jung would have called that compensation, not confidence. A man who needs to broadcast his certainty is usually the man least sure of it. Real composure doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to, because the people who actually hold power were never trying to convince anyone they had it. This is the trap inside the trap. You think the goal is to seem unreadable. It isn't. Seeming unreadable is just a more sophisticated performance, a mask worn to look like there's no mask. The actual goal is to become someone with nothing left to perform, because there's no gap between what you show and what you are.
Not because you've revealed everything, because you've stopped needing anyone to verify what's true about you. That's the part that took Jung decades to articulate properly, and most people never get there in a lifetime. Integration isn't hiding your shadow, and it isn't displaying it. It's reaching the point where the shadow no longer requires either response from you, because you've already faced it without an audience. There is a second trap waiting right behind the first one, and almost no one sees it coming. Once a man learns to stop performing his pain, he often swings the opposite direction and starts performing his silence instead. He goes quiet not because he's integrated anything, but because quiet has become a new costume, a way of looking deep without doing the work depth actually requires. Jung would have recognized this immediately for what it is. Withholding isn't wisdom by default. It's only wisdom when there's something underneath it being protected, not when the silence is hollow and performed for the exact same audience the openness used to serve. So here is how you tell the difference in yourself, because this is the part that actually matters. Ask whether your silence changes when no one is watching. The performed version needs witnesses. It relaxes the instant you're alone, because there was never anything being protected, only an image being managed. The integrated version stays exactly the same in private as it does in public, because it was never a performance to begin with. It was simply what happens when a person has nothing left to prove and nothing left to explain. This is the line most people will spend their entire lives standing on without ever crossing, managing the image instead of doing the integration, mistaking the mask for the wall behind it. Here is what actually changes once you understand this fully. You stop narrating your decisions to people who didn't ask and don't deserve the explanation. You stop defending choices that don't require defense, because defense is just another way of handing someone the schematic. You let people misread you, and you let the misreading stand, because correcting it would cost you more than the misunderstanding ever could. People will call this cold. It isn't. It's the difference between a door that's locked and a man who's simply not home. One invites a fight, the other ends it before it starts. The man behind the locked door still has something he's protecting. The man who's not home has nothing left that needs protecting, because the work happened somewhere no one else was invited. Jung never promised this makes you liked. He promised something heavier. It makes you sovereign. Liked is rented. Sovereign is owned. And sovereignty has a quiet cost almost no one warns you about. You will be misunderstood, sometimes by people whose opinion you actually value, and you will not get to correct it. Not because you can't, because correcting it would mean handing back the very thing you spent years learning to keep. That trade only feels difficult the first few times. After that, it stops feeling like a sacrifice and starts feeling like the floor you stand on. You were never supposed to be fully known. You were supposed to be the one who decides what's known, when, and to whom. And the moment you hand that decision to someone else, you've handed them the only real leverage they ever needed. So the question isn't whether people understand you. It's whether you've finally stopped needing them to.